doing our last session on the overview of Tanya. And obviously we didn't have enough time to go through the entire Tanya, but our goal was to get through chapter 17, which we did. And we want to today just give a short overview of what we did up to chapter 17, and then to give a little bit of an introduction to chapter 18. And if you want to get a better understanding, then you got to come to the daily classes. Can't give it to you all. Okay. So Tanya is based on the pasuk in Parshas from Rachel in Parshas Nitzavim, where it says Ki karei v'elach ha'adavar me'od v'ficha v'levavcha la'asosei, that this matter, meaning Torah and mitzvahs, is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart to do. In other words, in simple English, Torah and mitzvahs is very accessible to any Jew who wishes to live a Torah true lifestyle. It's there, it's available. You don't have to climb up to the heavens, you don't have to cross oceans. It's very near to you. No one said it's easy, but it's near. If you want, you can. Nothing to stop you. It's just your will. If your will's in the right place, you'll succeed. So up to chapter 17, the Alter Rebbe showed us one way of how it's near. From chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe is going to show us a further way of how it's near, and really the need for chapter 18 all the way through chapter 25 is because up to this point you can understand how it's karev, it's near, but the pasuk says karev me'od, it's very near, and very near, that needs a little more explanation, because what we said till now is near but not very near. From chapter 18 to 25 he explains how it's very near. We'll get to that in a moment, but first a quick recap on what we said in the first 17 chapters. We explained that a Jew needs to operate on two levels. There is the things that you do, and there's your feelings. Obviously, the things that you do, which includes in the Hasidic terminology, it's called your garments, the expressions of the soul. That's your thought, your speech, and your action. All of those things obviously need to be in check with Torah and mitzvahs, which means that you only use your power of deed for the sake of heaven, not for anything else. You don't go and do a sin, and you don't go and do something random that has nothing to do with God. Furthermore, you only use your power of speech for the sake of heaven. You don't go and speak gossip, lashon hara, or stam idle chat. You use your power of speech for the sake of God. And even your thought. Your thought is in your control, as we explained, that you can't necessarily decide which thoughts pop up into your mind, but you do decide which thoughts you entertain, which is a very important lesson in life. People have to understand that the thoughts that come up into your mind, you don't have to necessarily entertain. So even if you have very depressing thoughts or disturbing thoughts coming up, if you choose to divert your attention elsewhere, then those thoughts never have any power over you. And as we know, that a person can only have one thought in their mind at a time. You can't think about two things at once. So it's very easy. Maybe it's not always easy, but it's definitely very accessible for you to control your thoughts simply by diverting your attention. If there's a thought that pops up into your mind that is not a thought you want to be having, then you need to have a place to go that is safe, that's good. So whether it be just thinking about the nature outside, the weather outside, or something more solid like Torah and mitzvahs, if you learned an in-depth idea and you can always go there with your mind, well, that's a very safe haven, and it's a very easy way to protect yourself against unhealthy thoughts. The more of that you have, the safer you are, the stronger you are. B'chlal in life, not only with Torah and mitzvahs, it's also just to keep yourself sane. Not get down about everything that goes wrong. Every issue that goes wrong, you can go crazy if you let it get to you. But if you are in control, and you have to know, A, that you are in control in your mind, and then you have to have places where you can go which are safe havens, which are cities of refuge, or mikvah, like we'll learn in the Sikha, the second class today. So, a Jew is expected to control their thought, speech, and action, what they do. Furthermore, we said, it's not enough to just control your thought, speech, and action. That's not sufficient. You also need to have some level of control on the insides, on your emotions. I'm not saying total control, but nevertheless, there has to be some level of work going on the inside, because otherwise your Torah mitzvahs are dry, they're empty. You're just doing the right thing all the time, but your heart is completely elsewhere. What kind of relationship is that with God? We need your heart to be in it. If your heart's not in it, it's not the real way to do a mitzvah. It's not the real way to refrain from a sin. The real way to do a mitzvah is that you love God, to some degree at least. You love God, and you know that the only way to connect with God is by doing His mitzvahs and studying His Torah. That way your mind becomes one with God, and your hands and every part of you that's involved in the mitzvah becomes connected with God. So that's the real soul of a mitzvah, the love for Hashem. And the real soul of refraining from the Avera is not just you're afraid I'll punish you, but there's a relationship going on here. You have awe, respect. Like any relationship, you don't do certain things because you know that it's going to bother the other person. So you refrain from certain things. That's the soul of the refraining from Averas. So that's of utmost importance. It's not enough just to do the right thing. We also need your emotions to be there. And in some places, it says that Chassidus came just for that, to explain to a person how they can also have their emotions involved in Avodas Hashem. That it's a true relationship. You're not just going through actions so that you get a portion of the world to come, or so that you don't get punished. It's much deeper than that. Or in the words of the Zohar, that a mitzvah that's done without love and awe, respect for God, it doesn't fly heavenward. It gets stuck down here. It's like a bird without wings. Bird doesn't have wings.
So, are emotions repercussions of your thoughts? So, which you can control your thoughts, which is the garments, then emotions will fall in check.
Not necessarily. No, your garments actually, your thoughts serve your emotions.
But you can create an emotion from thought.
Through not thought, through deep intellectual meditation.
Which is thought.
Thought services intellect.
Okay.
Thought is not intellect. You could think about things that are not intellectual. Think about things that make no sense. Thought is just the tool that intellect uses. Yeah? It's like a computer screen and the brain of the computer. The screen, you could have all kinds of things. You can watch a video on it. You can do all kinds of things with the screen. Then there's the brain of the computer that uses the screen in order to... You can't access the brain of the computer without the screen. But the screen's not the brain. So a person's heart is not necessarily in their hands, but nevertheless, what we're saying here is that you do need to have some level of love for God. Otherwise, it's a bird without wings. The mitzvah has no life to it. It's like a body without a soul. So you got to have the emotions. And he explains that both of these things are totally accessible. Both controlling your thought, speech, and action, and developing a love for Hashem and an awe for Hashem. They're both accessible. And as he explained, that to develop, to control your thought, speech, and action is in your hands. Why is it in your hands? Because man has a certain nature. What's the nature of man? That moyach shalat alalev, that the brain controls the heart. That's the nature of a human being.
But it's only represents a lot of...
It's logical. No. They said the whole justice system is based on that. The whole...
Okay, justice.
You know, one could say I did it because I felt like it. That's not an excuse. If Moyach was not shalat alalev, then that would be a perfect excuse.
Yeah, but then it comes insanity, like a lot of people say.
Insanity means that someone who's not healthy. We're talking about a healthy person, a normal person. A normal person, the mind rules their heart. And since your mind rules your heart, therefore, that's a nature that God gave it, and the godly soul is in the mind, and the animal soul is in the heart, so therefore it makes no difference how much you want to do something. How strong this desire is. you have the power with your mind to control it and stop it. The mind can control the heart. And you can decide not to do it, even though you really, really, really want to do it. That's the nature within a human being. And so therefore, it's within our power to control everything that we do, everything we say, and everything we think.
You're saying that's the nature that comes naturally?
That's naturally.
We do that
100%.
constantly
But I
without
don't know.
You do it all the time.
You need to work on it.
Look, we're all behaving ourselves over here. But you know what? If your kids are at home and they're making you crazy, you might be screaming at them. But over here, you're not going to, because it's not really so fitting for an adult. People are going to look at you funny.
Then it's not
So
natural.
we can control ourselves. Even if someone agitates us, as much as our child just agitated us, we control ourselves. Why? Because we know that that's not nice. It's not acceptable. You do it all the time.
And how is this different? I'm still trying to grasp that Chris like about thoughts, which I think that was a really good point. You're saying thoughts serve the emotions, intellect rules over emotions. Could you explain a bit more what's the difference?
Between thought and intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I also think like intellect, I think it's a similar, like same thing.
Yeah. Did you understand the analogy we gave, or the analogy with the computer?
Right.
Did that make sense to you, or not really?
Yeah.
In your thought, you could think the words. You could think that 2 + 2 = 5. Can you think those words? Yes. Can you understand that? No. So, in your thought, you can be thinking about emotions. Nothing to do with intellect. The emotions might make no sense whatsoever. They're just your emotions, and you're thinking about them. Intellect is seichel. It makes sense. It's deep. It's part of the soul itself. So, yes, you're right. It uses thought. Intellect uses thought. It has no other way of expressing itself. You can't get into your intellect without thought. But thought is just a tool that the intellect uses to be able to work. And again, I think that's, I'm not sure if there's other examples, but I think that's the best example I've seen, the idea of a computer. The computer has an unbelievable brain. It can do things that a human being can't do. The computer can figure things out. I mean, let's just say even a math problem, right? So let's say you do 365 times 367, and it'll figure out for you in a second, right? Most human brains can't figure out that fast. So that means the computer has a brain, or some kind of, we'll call it a brain. I'm not sure what it's called, but that's not the screen. The screen doesn't have that. The screen is just accessing the brain of the computer. The screen itself can't work anything out. It's just a screen. But in order to get into the brain, you have to have a screen where you see the numbers and you type it in, and that goes into the brain and pulls out the information. But the screen itself is just a screen. You can have it for the same price a video being playing on it, or pictures being shown on it. I don't know. There's a screen's not a brain. So machshava, thought can be thinking about anything random. It doesn't have to be using intellect at all. It could be just entertaining. Think about what happened yesterday. Think about what the things look like outside. Think about things that make no sense. It's just it's a tool. It's not a brain. It's not you. It's a tool that the brain needs in order to explore ideas. But there's a lot of thought that goes on which has no brains involved. Most of our thoughts, a lot of our thoughts are not intellectually based at all. It's tricky because both of them use the brain, but one of them is a lot more external than the other. And Chassidus gives the example of 2 + 2 = 5. Your thought can think that your brain can't.
And isn't the Nefesh Hamas and Nefesh Elokis trying to rule over the Nefesh Seichos? Like, aren't they, the Galilean animals, all trying to take ownership, so to speak, of the intellectual soul?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so wouldn't that seem to imply that your intellect can be for negative things? It can be for things that are also just self-serving, silly, like not deep.
Yes, true. So you're saying, who says that just because intellect?
I'm saying Ashal al-Halay.
Yeah, Moyach Shal Halaleh, but who says that the Moyach?
That doesn't necessarily mean a positive thing. It could
Right.
mean like your intellect is
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
against Hashem plus Hashem.
Justifying things.
I don't know. I'm trying to just understand like
Yeah. So yeah, you're asking good questions, and this is like the deeper parts of the chapter. But one point is,
you can
one, no, you're asking, it's a good question. Number one is that the godly soul resides in the mind, right? The animal soul in the heart. The animal soul tries to control the mind, get control. But if a person davens properly, then the mind is healthy. And the godly soul that resides in the mind is strong, and it's a fortress. It controls the mind. If you don't daven properly, so then you can have a problem where you don't have full control of the mind. The animal soul sends up a thought, and it kicks in, and then it gets in the mind, and then you don't have this power so much. You're right. So good davening is what's necessary to exercise this power of Moyach Shalat Alalev, because who says you have the right thing in the Moyach? Who says you have the right thing in your mind? The mind rules, but you have to make sure you have the right thing in your mind. Right? So that's what davening is about. Because the start-off point is, the godly soul's in the mind. But you have to build up a strong fortress so that the things that come up from the animal soul that try to get into the mind are knocked off right away. That's one point. But it also brings to the second point that I wanted to say, which is the other reason why a person has the power to be successful over thought, speech, and action is because God gave the nature to holiness that it expels darkness easily. Like light expels darkness, holiness expels klipa. So if you decide in your mind that you want to do something right, it has the power to blow away the darkness.
You said
So-
easily?
Easily, yes. But you have to introduce not necessarily is it easy to turn on the light, but once you turn on the light, it's easy, the darkness is expelled easily. So if a person goes and studies Torah, that brings light into their life. And when you have that light, it makes it a lot easier to get rid of the darkness. So there's two things that God helps us with to make it possible for us to totally control our thought, speech, and action. One is the nature of mind over heart. And secondly, that might not always help you because your mind might also be struggling. You might have doubts in your mind itself. So secondly, the nature of light over darkness. That when you have holiness inside you, it makes it a lot easier to expel darkness. So that's not easy. You have to go and make the effort to go and study something, to go and get into a holy place. But when you do, it assists you. You have tremendous assistance to expel the darkness. As we quoted earlier from the Gemara that says, in Pagam Menuval Zev, this despicable one grabbed hold of you, meaning the evil inclination, then Moshcheyu lebeis hamedrash, schlep him to the study hall. Take him to the study hall because there you'll introduce light and that will easily enable you to expel the darkness. So that's why a person is able to control thought, speech, and action because of these two powerful tools. But furthermore, we need you also to have some kind of emotion. We said it's not enough to only operate on the external level. We also need you to change your heart a little bit. How could that be? So the Rabbi explained to us that there's two levels of love. There's passionate love for Hashem that not every person can get to. But then there's a love which is a cool type of love. It's not passionate. It's very intellectual. It's that you know that you love. You ought to love. It's also in the heart, but in the inner recesses of the heart. It's not a passionate, emotional love, but it's still love. And that's sufficient to propel your mitzvahs forward. That's sufficient to activate dreams for your mitzvahs. That's sufficient that when you do a mitzvah, you're doing it in the real way because you love God. Okay, not with a passionate love, but at least an intellectual love, that you know that you love Hashem. This comes through tremendous meditation, where you think about the greatness of Hashem. You think about how everything else in life is not much significance. How long does it last? It's all temporary. It's not that meaningful to look at all the pleasures in life. What are they really? It's very temporary. There's something that's really long-lasting and real. Whereas Hashem is infinite, and you learn about the greatness of God, and that makes you have at least an intellectual love. Maybe not a tzaddik, you don't manage to have a passionate love, but you understand in your mind that you love it, that is sufficient. So if that's accessible to every person, then that's sufficient. So therefore, this part of the Beinoni is also possible, not only to serve God with your thought, speech, and action, but also with your emotion.
The other one, second one.
The
Cool one.
You can do that. Certainly, you get the other one. It could be that you'll get the heated, passionate love from time to time, but it's not necessarily a long-term type of thing. You can have little flashes of it, yes, but a long-term thing, you can have this second love, this cooler love, but it's a love.
What's it called in Hebrew that you
One is called Ava Gluya,
Leah?
revealed love, and the other one is Ava Shibetalu Mislibai. Shibetalu Mislibai Ulibai. The love that's in the inner recesses of your mind and your heart.
Say the second one again.
Ava Shibetalu Mislibai Ulibai. Yeah, it's fine. So, therefore, because you have these two powers of intellect, of mind over heart, and darkness over light, and light over darkness, and you also have the ability to develop a cool, at least an intellectual love, therefore you can serve Hashem with your machshava divrei u'maaseh, thought, speech, and action, and even have a love to Hashem. And therefore, every single Jew can be a Beinoni. And that's a very brief overview of what we said in the first 17 chapters. Chapter 18 begins with saying that we need to explain the word of the verse, me'oid, a little bit more. Again, the whole Tanya is based on...
Chapter 18.
Yeah, the whole Tanya is based on it. This matter is very accessible, very near to you. Very near is questionable. Near, yes, but to say very near, says Alter Rebbe, the first 17 chapters don't necessarily make it very near. Why not? Because they require, in order to have, we said, to have the love, you have to meditate. You want to have a love to God, you have to sit and meditate about the greatness of God. To meditate, you have to have information to meditate on. You have to have the patience to meditate. You have to have the mind to meditate. And you have to have a heart that responds somewhat to meditation. Not every person has all of that. And yet, it's of utmost importance that a person has a love in their service of Hashem. Bilvavcha, there's got to be a love. So this is not necessarily very accessible. So from chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe starts a new program, a new explanation for 8 chapters, 18 through 25, including 25, where he explains another method which makes it very near to have a love to God. The thought, speech, and action, that's clear. That's not going to change. That's mind over heart. That every person can do. But here we're focusing on the love for God. And the love for God from chapters 18 to 25 don't need major meditation. As opposed to the first chapters that do need meditation, here you don't need in-depth meditation, and that makes it very near. What's the deal? How does this love work? So the Alter Rebbe starts to tell us that every Jew has a hidden love. You have a natural love that you're born with. As a Jew, you're Jewish, you have that love. You became Jewish, you get that love. A Jewish soul loves God. That's the way it is. And you love God so much that you're ready to give up your life for Him. Only thing is, it's a hidden love. You don't feel it all the time. So you have to work on revealing it. But you have it inside you. You have this unbelievable, infinite love to Hashem. And he proves it. He says, look, most Jews are ready to give up their life rather than convert. As we see in history, that many Jews gave up their life. Not every single time does it happen, but most times it happens like that. That a Jew will give up their life rather than convert. Rather than disconnect from God. And this is true not only about the rabbis and saints. It's true about every Jew. And even he says, a kal shabikalim. Someone who is so low that the lowlifes call them a lowlife. A kal shabikalim. Even the lowest of Jews, the biggest sinner, their natural response usually would be that they'd rather give up their life than disconnect from God, even though they don't keep Torah mitzvahs. They don't keep anything, let's say. They outright go and sin in public, but nevertheless, when it comes to it, where it's a disconnect from God of converting, they'd rather give up their life. When we did it in Tanya, we gave a few stories. One of the stories is the famous story about Joseph, the holy thief. That on a Napoli, there's a grave, there's a tombstone that says, here lies Joseph, the holy thief. Yosef, Haganav HaKodesh. So if he was a Ganav, what makes him holy? And if he was holy, how could he be a thief? So the way the story goes is that Yosef was a petty thief, and he would steal every day. He would go to work and steal a few kopecks or whatever it was, and he provided for his family. But as time was going on, he was getting older, and he thought he can't go to work every day like this anymore. He's getting too old for the job. He decided he has to make a big theft so he could retire. He thought, where can I steal from? The only place he could steal from was the church. That's the only place that had the type of money that he needed to retire on. And that's what he did. One night he made his way through the streets of town, broke into the church with ease. He found the money with ease, and he made this big theft, and he was happy he could retire. But obviously, they found out very quickly, and they right away turned to Joseph because he was known as a thief. And they found the money in his house. He was arrested, and he was going to be burnt at stake for the terrible crime of stealing money from the church. As he's being burnt at stake, as the day comes, the priest tells him, Joseph, you have a family, you have a wife, you have kids. If you convert to Christianity, then I'll let you live. And Joseph refused. And they threw him into the fire. And they're saying, please, you can save yourself. He says, listen, I might be a thief, but I'll always remain a Jew. And he died that way. So he was a thief, but he was holy. So the question is, if he cared about Torah mitzvahs so much, where was his, he was stealing every day. He was going against the Torah every day. But nevertheless, when it came to it, to disconnect from God, from his Judaism, that he couldn't. He's ready to the point that he's just going to give up his life. So that's every Jew. Every Jew naturally is ready to give up their life rather than disconnect from God. Even the lowest of the low. So we have this love. Only thing is that the love is hidden. We don't feel it. And it only comes out in extreme times. So the key is to reveal it, to access it. And how do you access it? The way you access it is by thinking about the love itself. You don't have to sit and meditate. You don't have to create a new love. If you have to create a new love, like the earlier chapters, well, that's not easily accessible. It's accessible, but we can't say it's very current mind, because you have to create a new love. You have to meditate. You have to fret for hours on end. You have to really have the mind for it, the heart for it, and so on. But here we're saying you love God already. It's already there in your heart. You don't have to create anything new. You just have to uncover it. To uncover it, that's already very accessible. You just have to think about the fact that you're a Jew, that you love God, and that you're ready to give up your life for God. And through that, you reveal the love. When you reveal the love, that's good enough love to be a wholesome Jew. Not only thought, speech, and action, but also to have the right emotions in your service of God. Now, this section of Tanya, 18 to 25, which is really the last section we did before we had this winter program, is divided into 3 parts. The first part focuses on the natural love that every Jew has, explains what it's all about, where it comes from, how it works, However, that's a great idea to explain to us that we all have this love, but it only comes out in extreme situations when we want to convert, someone wants to get us to convert. Well, that's not so practical, because day-to-day life, we're not being held, a gun is not being held to our head and asking us to convert. Day-to-day life, we need to have a love that can work in day-to-day life, in normal life, where there's no major extreme situations. So in the next 5 chapters, the Rabbi explains how one can access that love in their day-to-day life.
So from 19 to
18 and 19 explain the love itself, the nature of the love, and how extreme it is. 20 to 24, including 24, explain how that love can be accessed in regular life. And basically, the Rabbi gives an explanation, and he shows how, in essence, every single mitzvah is believing in one God, and every avera is denying the one God. And that's what those chapters are dedicated to explain to you this idea that when you come to a sin, you should realize that it's just as bad as conversion. And when you come to a mitzvah, it's just as great as believing in one God. And that's what those chapters are dedicated to. And chapter 25 ties it all together and shows, well, now that if you get this appreciation and realize how every mitzvah is believing in one God, is a detail of your belief in one God, and every avera is, if you do that avera, it's like serving an idol. And he makes it very clear, based on deep concept of the oneness of God, which we explained at length throughout the year. It's beyond the scope of this overview, but he explains a very deep concept. And once you understand that and realize that every time you sin, it's the same as serving an idol, and worse in a certain sense. He explains that a person who sins is the lowest possible thing in creation. He says even evil, the realm of evil, and the way he says it is a gnat or a mosquito, which takes and doesn't give. It's the lowest thing, because holiness is about giving. Taking is klippa. Something that takes and doesn't give, it doesn't excrete anything, it just eats. It represents the lowest possible klippa. But a person who sins is lower than that, because at the end of the day, the whole evil realm and the lowest of things, they're following the word of God. They're not doing anything against God. Even Bilam, the wicked Bilam, said, I can't do something against what God wants. Whereas a Jew who's sinning is going against the will of God. We explained this at length and in depth, but the point is that a sinner is the lowest possible thing. And you don't have to do a big sin to do that. Even a small sin is exactly that. So once a person appreciates that, then every time it comes to a sin, they can remember, hey, I'm ready to give up my life not to disconnect from God. I could give up this little temptation not to disconnect from God. It might be a big temptation, but I'm ready to give up my life. Certainly I can give up the temptation. And so based on this, one is able to serve God with love, based on the hidden love. Even though it's a hidden love, it's naturally there, but it's hidden. But you can uncover it by meditating on what's explained in these 8 chapters. And that's really what 18 to 25 is there to do. And in fact, Chassidim explained that in the beginning of the Tanya, it says that the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us this verse of how everything is very accessible to us. He says, "B'derech harucha u'ktsara," in a long, short way. That's what it says at the beginning of the Tanya. It's a long, short way. What does it mean, a long, short way? So the usual explanation is that Tanya is a long way. It's not a short way. It's not like if you suffer from anger, let's open up the chapter on anger. It's going to help you with anger. If you suffer with jealousy, yeah, let's open up the chapter with jealousy, and I'll explain to you how to deal with jealousy. It doesn't even have to be in a mussar way. It can be in a positive way, you know. But that's not Tanya. Tanya doesn't deal with one issue at a time. That's a short way. You go straight to the issue that you're feeling. Tanya's not like that. Tanya's a long way. It's long because it says, wow, you have problems, you're dealing with anger, different unhealthy temptations, you have jealousy, you have depression, all these issues. Okay, we're going to take a step back and explain to you who you are. Before we even get into those things, we're going to talk about who you are. Let's talk about who you are. You're a Jew. You have 2 souls. How do the souls function? What's going on inside you? It's a whole build-up. It's a long way. but it's a long, short way, because ultimately, when you understand your inner workings, you understand what it's all about, it's short because you get to your final goal. You don't have to come back. It's a wholesome solution, unlike if we help you solve your anger issue. But you'll be back with a different issue. You'll be back with, that's all, there's another issue, there's another problem. It's not a wholesome solution. This is a wholesome solution. It's long, but it's short, because it gets you to where you have to be. That's the time. That's the simple explanation that's given in that expression that's brought in the beginning of the Tanya, a long, short way. But there's another explanation that a long way is chapters 1 to 17. You can even say, 15, 16, 17, but let's say 1 to 17 is the long way. The short way is 18 to 25. The long way requires that you meditate. It's a longer way. You have to meditate and create a love. The shorter way says to you, you already love God to an extreme, to the point that you're ready to give up your life. You just have to access it. It's a shorter way. You don't have to create anything new. You just have to uncover what's already inside.
So what's 25? What's left?
25 ties it all up. He says, okay, now that you understand that every Avera is giving up, is like idol worship, and every mitzvah is believing in the one God, now you have the power at every turn in life to apply, to access your hidden love.
Which type of love is hidden? Is it one and the same two as that? No, it's really different.
The hidden love itself can work in different ways. Like the two ways we said before, sometimes you have a passion love, sometimes you have an intellectual love. Like you know that you love, the hidden love will work the same way. You can have it in both ways. But it's a very different type of love. One of them, the earlier love is from Bina, this love is from Chachma. It's a different type of love.
But would it manifest differently?
Okay, so let me just say the last point that I want to say, and that should answer what you're asking. So this is the short way. It's 8 chapters dedicated to explain the short way. Really, the long way is really in 15, 16, and 17, because the whole earlier part just tells you what a person is. The long way is more about the meditating and creating a love. So the long way is really explained in a shorter amount of time, and the short way is explained with more chapters. But nevertheless, it's shorter because it doesn't require you to create a new love. It's already there. That takes us all the way to chapter 25, and chapter 26, he starts to deal with, okay, now that we know how to serve God and how to battle and the whole thing, what happens if things go wrong? Like you have problems with children, God forbid, or with parnasa, or with health, all kinds of things that can depress a person. You can totally shut them down. But we're telling you that it's very accessible to serve God all the time, 100%, with the love. And what happens when these type of things, God forbid, happen? They totally disable a person. So he's going to teach us how to deal with them in chapter 26.
Doesn't it first talk about if you're, when does it talk about if you, like, hearing all that might make you depressed? If you like hearing what Alter was saying about every Avera is like what is Zara. You first say that and then say from Kashmir's things that you get depressed.
The first thing he does with the Gashmis. First he deals with Gashmis.
Yeah.
And then he deals with things that with Ruchnis that can depress a person.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do starting Rosh Chodesh around the beginning of Elul in a few weeks. But the last point over here I want to say is that if there's a long way and a short way, then what's the point of giving the long way? Just give the short way.
It's more long term.
No, the short way is also long term.
You need to fall back on each one.
Okay, so right, so obviously each one has an advantage over the other, and the long way has a big advantage over the short way. The meditating and creating a love through meditating about Hashem has a certain advantage, and the way Chassidus explains it, it's in chapter 44 of Tanya, but the way Chassidus explains it, one of the ways it's explained is that it's the difference between the love between siblings and the love between spouses. The short way is siblings. The long way is spouses. So which one is better? The love between siblings or spouses? Which one's better?
Different.
They're different, and each one obviously has an advantage. Which one's more reliable? Siblings. You can't break that. That's forever. No matter what you do, you'll always have that connection to your sibling.
You have siblings that don't talk to each other.
Yeah, but they're still connected, and they can't ignore that fact. And they can't
So they have
live.
the same blood.
Yeah,
Flesh and
they
blood.
have the same blood, and they can't.
No choice.
Ultimately, they can't really be happy 100% if they have blood that they don't talk to. They have a blood relative they don't talk to. Whereas with divorce, they divorce, it's over. Next, out. That person's out of your life. I mean, definitely more than a sibling. You don't have any positive connection with them necessarily. So a sibling is more reliable, but a spouse is more passionate. There's a lot you can't make a life with a sibling. You make a life with a spouse. So the first chapters, the long way is a spouse. In other words, you meditate about God, develop a new love to God. It's not what's already inside you. You build a relationship like a spouse. You create a love to Hashem. That's powerful. It's important. There's a certain excitement over there. Nevertheless, that could break. Sometimes it doesn't last forever, like a marriage. It doesn't necessarily. It could, So you have what to fall back on. What you fall back on is the short way. The short way is the natural love that you always had as a sibling. You have a connection to God as a sibling. You have a connection to God as a spouse. Don't you work on having that spouse connection. But when that's not working, you go for the sibling. There's something to fall back on. That's very strong. So that's an answer to someone was asking a question about what's the difference between these loves. That's the difference. One is a more passionate and exciting one. Even the one that you ought to love, but it has more excitement than the sibling one, than the short way. The short way is more of a calm, except in extreme situations where it comes to giving up your life. But generally speaking, it's more of a sibling type of relationship. It's more reliable, but it's calm.
So it's the long love, the love that's like spouses, but there was also two different types of love, passionate and full. Isn't that like spouses?
So even the intellectual love of the long way, right, is more about passion, more about a connection to something new.
Even that second level.
Yeah, is more of a passion love than the sibling one, which by its nature is more of this is already something that's connected. It's an essential bond. It's not like when there's a love to something that's outside of you. There's more excitement to it. It's not you. It's you building a relationship with something outside of you. So there's more of an excitement to it than the love that's the sibling love. Sibling love is not an exciting relationship. It's not an exciting relationship between a sibling. There's not excitement, but it's solid to the point that you might do, unbelievable things for a sibling. Really go out of your way. So the same is true here. You have this love, this connection to God that you can't disconnect from. It's not like a passion that you just can't disconnect.
Where does it fit in like love like a child? We always talk about Hashem being like a father.
So
Could be technically like the sibling one. It's always
both of them. Later on, like the later chapters of Tanya, like the Mems and on, speak about all different levels of love, Abba, Rabba, Abba, Salem. And in that, all kinds of different levels of love. And both of these loves have many different categories, many different details in them.
Uh-huh.
So both of them can, I guess, in some way be like a child.
Okay.
Essentially, in the later chapters, let's leave the spouse and the sibling thing for a moment. The main point between the loves of the short way and the long way in the later chapters is the way it's expressed is it something you create or something that's already within you? That's the main difference. And in what you create, you can have a love like a child, you can have different levels of love, and in what's already in you, you can also access different types of that love. So that's really the last stretch of Tanya explained, of the first book, explains all of those. You got it.
Are we all able to reach the person I love person?
Not necessarily long term. That's more of a tzaddik. Some Beinanim can, but possibly like during davening. Not a long, not an ongoing thing, but yeah, during davening or different times you could. Okay, so that's a short overview of chapter 18, and Emily will continue from chapter 26 in a few weeks. We'll do a sikh in about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
So there's been no more classes.
Not until the 1st of Elul.
Not even continuous.